Well, let's continue our startup discussions here on the Living Markets this evening. Of course, this is all in the run-up to the Swiss Economic Forum 2019, which kicks off on Thursday. Joining me here in the studio is Mark Greeven, Professor of Innovation and Strategy at IMD. You're actually going to be speaking at the Swiss Economic Forum this week on startups. But we just heard from Price Hubble before the break, and their plans to enter the Chinese market. Their CEO says it's a great market, but a challenging one. And I'm sure he's talking about the real estate industry when he says that. But, right. I mean, this is something you could say of the Chinese startup environment as well. Right. This is your speciality.
Right. I spent 14 years in China, basically working with Chinese startups and trying to understand how they do business in China and how they come up with new products and services. And I can confirm, you know, the Chinese market is not an easy market. And I think there's a lot of reasons for that, and probably the most obvious one is it's kind of a special government with a lot of regulations, and it's different than the Western markets. But I think that's not what makes it a challenging market. It's in particular very competitive, very competitive, and also the consumers in China are extremely demanding and increasingly sophisticated. So it's not easy. And
in that regard, with such a discerning customer, China's a great test bed, isn't it, for companies that do want to launch themselves on a global platform?
Exactly. So if you look at China, I see China as a big sandbox. It's like a place where you can play as a company, as a big company, and especially as a startup, because this is a very large market, so there's a lot of little pockets that you can play around, and it's a great place because there's availability of capital, availability of talent, and let's be honest, the implementation of regulation is still a little bit more relaxing than for instance, in Western Europe or here in Switzerland. So that leads to opportunities.
And does that mean then that startups based in China or working out of China are more successful than startups that perhaps are here in Switzerland?
Well, the thing is, most startups fail. And whether or not they're in Switzerland or in China, that's still the same. So most startups and most founders, they won't succeed, at least not at the first time they start a company. In China, what we see is that a lot of companies, they try and they start, they fail, and they try again. And I think that the Chinese environment for trying out and experimenting is probably a little bit more forgiving than, for instance, the Swiss market. So from that point of view, more successful, I'm not sure, but more chances to reach the success, probably yes.
Okay, and I'm reading a lot of what you're writing about China, and I understand that things move incredibly quickly in China, and that is also a catalyst for success.
Right.
Can you just explain how quickly things move?
So the thing is, like, when you go to China, you go there every 5 years, and for sure you miss every development in the city, in whatever is happening there. If you go there every year, you miss most of the things. So if you go there every half a year, you probably will capture the big trends. But actually, if you want to really be on top of what is happening in China, you need to live there and live and breathe all the developments day by day. And this is in particular when it comes to digital technologies. And this is, of course, one of the fields that the startup you mentioned is interested in. So I think it is a place which is moving really rapidly, which also leads to opportunities, because sometimes speed is also an opportunity for entrepreneurs to find new opportunities that didn't exist yesterday.
I'm getting an impression that you're a big fan of China, but is there something that Switzerland can offer the startup community that China can't?
Obviously. So although there's a lot of advantages to be part of an environment that is experimental and allows you to do a lot of different things, such as China's, but of course there's a lot of disadvantages as well. So Switzerland is, of course, extremely strong in an ecosystem of highly successful companies that are around for dozens, sometimes hundreds of years. We also see an immense amount of talent with top universities, real good talent base here in Switzerland. And then again, let's not forget, we also have capital available in the Swiss market. So I think there's a couple of indications that Switzerland could be actually really a hub for entrepreneurs in a way that China could probably not yet be.
So do you think we're not necessarily reaching our true potential when it comes to cultivating a startup community here in Switzerland?
Yeah, I think that Switzerland faces a little bit the problem of the innovation paradox, which a lot of big companies also face. And that's basically the more successful you become the larger you become, the more competitive you become, and in fact Switzerland is on the top of the list of competitiveness and innovativeness, then it becomes more and more difficult to challenge that status quo. It becomes more and more costly to say, let's do things completely different. And that's the type of mindset that an entrepreneur must have and also must be facilitated to have. So that's, I think, is a bit of a challenge, perhaps in an environment which is so good as Switzerland is.
When you talk about mindset and you compare China to Swiss for startups, China very much puts emphasis on employees and they recruit people who put the customer first and the product first.
Right.
Whereas here in Switzerland, we pride ourselves on having the top graduates from these fantastic schools which are highly skilled. What's better?
Well, I'm not sure if one is better than the other. It depends on the market. So today in China, as I said earlier, the consumer and the customers are so demanding. So as a company, you have no choice. You have to put the customer really at the center of your offering. And sometimes that means that you offer a product which is maybe not the best possible offering, maybe not the highest level of technology or science, but it certainly is a product that people actually want to buy. So we see a big difference in markets such as Switzerland or Europe or China, is that in China, it must be customer first, because otherwise you're just going to lose out as a company. In Europe, we can get away with producing really good quality products, and then we can find, in most cases, also customers that are willing to buy that. And that is a bit of a difference. But I'm thinking that this is also going to change. Because even today in Western Europe or parts of Western Europe, we see that customers also are very, very demanding and maybe not always want to have the best product or the highest quality or the best performing product. Sometimes a good enough product is also, well, literally good enough.
Good enough, sure. How does the US-China trade war affect the startup industry? Does it?
I think that for startups, to be honest, so I talked to a lot of my Chinese entrepreneur friends, they care a little bit about it, from sort of a pride and nationalist feeling of, we are China and we are big. They care about this and from this point of view, but for their business, for most of the businesses, it is not a big deal, unless obviously they're in trade or in part of the business that is currently being hindered. I think what does matter in this trade war is that there's an opportunity for places like Switzerland and Europe to emerge as a very nice and safe and stable kind of sort of a landing spot for entrepreneurs.
Could we also benefit from this slowing Chinese economy? Is that a potential area for us?
I think the economy's growth is deaccelerating. So it's still a growing economy. So I think that the market is still very interesting for entrepreneurs to be part of. So the cake is still getting bigger in China. But of course, as European countries, Switzerland or my home country, the Netherlands, I think we could benefit from the fact that business in China is getting more and more difficult, more competitive, slowing down economy, the trade war. And this is obviously an opportunity for countries such as Switzerland to really try to excel in what they're good at, in knowledge, in technology, in sciences. So there is an opportunity, but the question is, are we going to do something about it?
You will be speaking at the Swiss Economic Forum this week. What is your message to entrepreneurs and startups here in Switzerland? So
I think there's two messages. So one is, I would say, go east, boys and girls. I think it's absolutely a place you want to try out, you want to test not only your business idea, but you also want to test your own emotional flexibility and agility. Go to China, try out, face that uncertain environment. I'm sure you're going to learn a lot of stuff there that you can use either in China or in your home countries. I think that's one thing. I think the second thing is try not to be too influenced by the bigger geopolitical tensions that we see today. And it's unfortunate that we see a lot of news about China and the US always in a negative context. And the trade war is there. It's not going to end very soon. And there are going to be all kinds of other conflicts between China and the US. But what is really, I think, important for entrepreneurs is look also at China as a way to maybe learn a couple of things. Maybe it's time to copy China.
For once.
For once.
Okay. Mark Greeven, thank you very much indeed for joining us. Well, that's all we have time for in tonight's Living Markets. Lots more still to come on the Swiss Pulse, of course, as always. And all our startup interviews are available by checking out our website, cnnmoney.ch. Bye-bye.